And just so that you know what I'll probably do, because of this feedback, I'm going to mute myself when we speak, and then you and so that I can hear you, because the feedback might be coming from me. 5. Hi, everybody. Happy New Year. Welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show. Boy, we've got a lot to talk about. I thought 2024 was something else, but boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, it seems that 2025 is off to a roaring start. Wow. I mean, 2024, the year that was. But it seems that, 2025, we have got, as we were coming into 2025, we saw several plane crashes inside of a week, massive casualties. And now people are having fun in New Orleans. We're about to come into Fat Tuesday next month, and they're going to have the Super Bowl there, the Sugar Bowl, and New Year's night around 3 o'clock in the morning. An Army veteran plowed into dozens of people, killing at least 15, more than almost 3 dozen or so, 35 or so, who are injured, hospitalized at this point. And it turns out he is someone who is a veteran. He is someone who has a connection to the gentleman whose car exploded in front of the Trump property just off the strip in Las Vegas. They're from the same Army base. And this young man, this 42-year-old, who had a troubled background, several marriages, owed his ex-wives a lot of money and all of that in child support, lived in squalor, according to reports. Well, turns out that he was affiliated with ISIS. And so the legacy media are asking, well, what about ISIS? And they're also asking, well, how did he get radicalized? And I said, well, you know what? Let me go to someone who's much brighter than I, brilliant woman who I've had on this show before. Indeed, a woman of tremendous courage. I have a few sheroes in my life, and she's one of them. Indeed, FBI whistleblower, the brilliant and the steadfast Colleen Rowley. I thank you so much. Thank you so much for your courage. And this is a time that I agreed with Time Magazine picking you as one of their persons of the year. I said, okay, much of the time I have to go, huh? But that time I said, yeah, this makes sense to me. I need you to help me to understand what we're looking at here. Because I see these veterans who come, and I'm not trying to say that all veterans do this, Colleen Rowley, but there's something going on here. Everyone is asking, how did this shooter, who was killed by the police because he came out of his car shooting, they wanted to know, okay, how did he get radicalized? But we've never been quite clear on who ISIS actually are. WikiLeaks told us, they said, well, they're actually a creation of the CIA. I don't know. You got to help me understand, what am I looking at? And everyone wants to know, how was he radicalized? Help me, Colleen Rowley.
Well, for starters, there's not a completely simple explanation, but I think there are several insights that I can add, and unfortunately, which the mainstream media are not really mentioning and are not delving into, because they're not politically correct. The mainstream media is always trying to frame the narrative and make us, believe. They're trying to shape public opinion. And one of the public opinions that they've been trying to shape since 9/11 is that the United States has to be involved in perpetual war. And perpetual war means that we are going to have perpetual military veterans. And even though it's absolutely true, obviously, not all military veterans are going to become mass shooters, or in this case, use a car or a truck. And by the way, there's many other ways that they can use violence without even having a weapon, without even having a car or truck or a gun or an IED. But there's a reason why there is a really significantly disproportionate number of military veterans that have turned into mass shooters. And like in this case of the two, by the way, not just the one in New Orleans, but also the one at the Trump Tower, both using vehicles, either as bombs or in order to just hit people. And there are some reasons for that, which should be asked. Our mainstream media should be saying, why is this the case? I think the stats kind of vary, but there was already, and this is nothing new, by the way. That's one of the things. Our news makes it seem like this has just started. This is all something that just happened in 2025. You can go back all the way to 2016. I looked it up because I had seen this article and these mathematical, numbers, and I couldn't remember the article exactly. And the New York Times, to its credit, back in 2016, how many years ago would that have been? Going on 9 years ago, after a whole series of military veterans shooting it up. And when you're desperate, when you're homeless, when you're helpless, when you have personal problems, you can become basically so desperate and so depressed that you will engage not only in suicide, and by the way, there's a much higher proportion of suicide amongst military veterans, but you will also engage in homicide. And in the case of these veterans, it's mass homicide. Now we should be asking, why is that? Back in 2016, this article said that around 12 or 13% of the population are military veterans. And of course, that includes everything from World War II and Korea and Vietnam, et cetera, till now, till the so-called war on terrorism that began the last 24 years, last 20 some years. And the numbers at that time was around 10% of the population, 12% are military veterans. 1/3 of the mass shooters are military veterans. So you can see that disproportionate thing. And again, we did have that one article in the New York Times. Some of our peace groups, one leader of a peace group, David Swanson, he actually went through every news article, because oftentimes the news articles put it as the last line. They don't put it up front. Now we know these most recent two were not only military veterans. The guy that had the car that exploded near the Trump Tower, he had 5 Bronze Stars. 5 Bronze Stars, and he was a decorated, honored military veteran from the same base. As it's not known if they knew each other, and I think it's actually scarier if they didn't know each other. If these two guys, military veterans, were just off like you said, radicalized, but radicalized is not quite the right term. Our news wants to call it radicalized because they want to keep up the so-called war on terror, even though it's a huge paradox right now, because the United States has actually embraced the former leader of Al-Qaeda and ISIS. He's a former top leader, in order to install him as the to topple Assad in Syria. So by toppling Assad in Syria, we installed one of the former leaders of Al-Qaeda and ISIS. It's incredible. So that paradox, that's even it's not even a euphemism to call it a paradox. Honestly, this is beyond irony. This is the most sickest hypocrisy in the world. But besides that war on terror, it continues. And one of the pretexts for the United States staying and carving off a portion of Syria is we claim to be fighting ISIS. Now, perhaps that's what this guy saw. He saw that the reason why 2,000 military soldiers are still in Syria, and Trump said, he told the truth. Trump told the truth. He said, it's so we can steal their oil. Trump told the truth about it. We have the military in Syria so we can steal their oil. That was from Trump's mouth. But the more careful propagandists say, we are fighting ISIS in Syria. That's what the rationale, and who knows what to believe. But we just installed one of the former heads of ISIS in Al-Qaeda and claimed that he's rehabilitated himself. But going back to this desperation, depression, hopelessness, that I think is the root cause. When you listen to Lester Holt on NBC at night, he'll say, what was the motive? He'll report these mass shootings every night, and then it's almost a compulsory. When they script those news accounts, they write, what was the motive? The police are still seeking the motive. And I cringe every time I hear that, because what do people think of when you say the word motive? Well, we all think of an Agatha Christie mystery in the old days when, the husband poisoned the wife for the insurance proceeds, etc. That's a motive. But getting mad because you see something on the news and you're so depressed and you have your own personal problems, and basically people who are emotionally vulnerable, they often have been led to believe that if they commit violence, shoot them up, hit people with a car, that's somehow going to solve their personal problems. I mean, it's crazy thing to think, but that's what people come to believe when they're so depressed. And you know what? Military veterans have been conditioned to see violence as the answer to what? Our government's problems. So they're told that if there's a terrorism attack, if our standard of living is going down in the United States, anything at all, a problem, that the United States government tells soldiers going to war and killing people in foreign countries will be the answer to our problems. And it's not that hard to understand how a person who can't get a lot of these people, they couldn't get a date. So they were mad because they couldn't get a date. Or they, like in this case, he's economically in very bad straits. I mean, a lot of personal problems. That's not a motive. Having personal problems and then seeing the answer as I got to kill as many people as I can, because somehow that's going to salvage my I don't know what people think. They think it's going to lead to somehow making a difference, or at least to their personal moment of mattering. When you're so depressed that you don't see any reason for living, this gives people a reason to think they matter. And now the great fear, by the way, is that there will be more copycats, and there already have been more mass shootings. Even since, we're only 24 hours, we're about 24 hours into 2025. And we've had these two if you want to call them terrorism, but I think there's a better term for it. I think they're basically blowback. I think it's blowback from perpetual war that now has created a lot of military trained veterans that do see their answer as killing people. And why? Because they've been desensitized to killing. That's what the military training does. And they've come to believe that this is the answer. And some of them are quite good because they've been given training. So they know how, I wouldn't have the foggiest idea how to make a bomb. And apparently this guy probably, it looks like he placed a couple of bombs, IEDs or something. Well, you know what? What was his military training? So we're training people on these levels. And then again, our mass media does not help because they will not address the root cause of this. They want Band-Aid solutions. This is another one of my pet peeves. What have you heard? I hate to pick on Lester. I hate to pick on Lester Holt, but I will pick on him just a little because I watch him quite often. And one of the things that they've focused on, besides, what was the motive, one of the things they focused on are the barricades, the lack of good barricades. Why did the barricades fail? And that is a complete red herring straw man. The truth is the police and the government wants to make you think that they can keep you secure.
Mm.
And so they will always focus on a little Band-Aid thing like, oh, if we just get better barricades, we can protect you at the Super Bowl and at the Boston Marathon and in your churches and in your schools. If we just put an officer in the school, that will protect you. All of these things are at best Band-Aids. They're at best Band-Aids. And at worst, they're a distraction from the real problem here, which should be addressed, because we are not decreasing the mass violence. The mass violence is at epidemic proportions. And, and even if they have a way of keeping cars and trucks out, even if they have a way of searching every person going into an area to make sure they don't have a gun or a bomb, you know what? You can do things without any of those weapons to actually commit mass violence. I don't even want to list a few of them because I don't want to give people ideas. To be honest, I don't. But I can see where other forms of mass violence don't even require a weapon. You can do these things with your bare hands. And it's because, you know what? We have an American way of life. We want to go out in public. We want to go to restaurants. We want to have our kids go to schools. We want to watch marathons, etc. We want to have this kind of life. And you know what? Our government is lying to us if they're telling us that if they wage perpetual war for 24 years and they have people all incited and riled up on many levels all throughout the world, not to mention the blowback that has come back to haunt us internally, domestically here, they are lying to us if they are telling you that they can keep you safe just by more barricades. And even gun control would not do it. I'm telling you, gun control would do something, but it would not be the end all be all solution.
Why not?
We can't end this.
Why not?
Because, in Japan's a great example. If you look at other countries, Japan has excellent gun control. Mm-hmm. And still that if they incite people and they lead to this kind of mass depression, they can use all kinds of other things that to commit actually mass violence, maybe less effectively. I agree. I'm all for, by the way, reasonable limits, obviously, automatic weapons that have no hunting purpose. The huge magazines where you can go in Las Vegas and shoot 50 people. I mean, some of this is ridiculous, and it just absolutely helps and enables mass shootings. But there are other ways, and again, I don't even want to go into. We'll talk off maybe when we're done. I'll mention a couple. I don't want to mention these ways publicly, but when people, think about this. Now, this did require a weapon. And I was frankly surprised. At the time of 9/11, we had two other forms of terrorism. One was the weaponized anthrax that came out of Fort Detrick, out of bioweapon, research labs where they had weaponized, aerosolized anthrax at Fort Detrick. And then it was used to kill, I think, 6 people and sickened another dozen or so. That happened 3 weeks after 9/11. People have forgotten. It didn't require a gun or a car. The other thing that happened was the sniper who got there were 2 guys. One was the driver and one was the younger kid in the back in the trunk. And they pretty much brought Washington, D.C. to a standstill. Yeah. Shooting. I was actually surprised. That is a very, if you want to call it, creative form of terrorizing a city. And you know what? I was actually surprised that more people didn't copycat that because it was quite effective and they were not able to catch them for a long time. But if you really want to commit mass violence, there are lots of ways. And you know what? The real issue here is why? Why is this happening now? Why is this just, like I said, off the charts in epidemic proportions? And yet this is why our mass media, we don't even have the discussion. Like I said, a couple of articles, if you go back to 2016, and even that professor who wrote the article about the disproportionate number of military veterans who have turned into mass shooters, he got pilloried by readers of the New York Times. Nobody wanted to hear it. Because, thank you for your service. You're fighting for us to keep us safe, blah, 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 all this nonsense. And most of that war on terrorism is based on lies. Some of the military people figure it out after a while. I know a lot of veterans for peace, even from Vietnam, and they figured out after a while that they were being lied to. And guess what? They get quite angry about it when they realized they ended up in massacres and everything else. And they would never have done this had they not been fooled and duped.
Well, but speak to, if you don't, the sense of betrayal, because I remember a very small little anecdote, but I've seen it happen more than once. I was shopping for a sofa. I just moved to New York. I'm looking in the stores, and I said, "Oh, I saw this sofa, this red sofa." I said, "I think this is for me." So I go inside, and there was a very nice gentleman who was one of the salespersons at the store. And we're talking with Colleen Rowley, FBI whistleblower, one of Time Magazine's Persons of the Year in 2002. Also, Women Against Military Madness. I want you to talk about that. Because really, women, military madness. I need you to talk about that. And he had a meltdown. And a couple of his colleagues came from different parts of the store, and they apologized for him because he became very agitated, and they had to calm him down. And they apologized to me. And one gentleman, I guess because I was concerned about him, he said, he's a Vietnam vet. I said, "Oh, I understand." And I said, "Are you all able to get him any help?" Because I was just very concerned. You hate to see someone come apart. But I've seen this. I mean, he's been traumatized. And I don't know if we really look at that, because you stated this earlier, but I need you to emphasize it, because I want people to understand we're not anti the troops. Actually, we're supporting the troops.
Mm-hmm.
You support the troops because you want them to be well. Matthew Ho's been on my show. Matthew. He's been on the show many times, and he talks about moral injury. And he said, you have to be trained to kill. I mean, what Mother's Day for Peace, the poem says, "I'm not going to unlearn," to paraphrase, or unteach my children all of these Christian values of charity and of the affirmation of life, all of these things, by sending them to war. I'm not going to do that. And I need you to speak to that, because the training, we're not thinking about the training, Colleen Rowley, and what happens when you bring them, and our veterans, we don't care for them. They get their discharge papers, and then they're tossed back into general population, if you will, right? They may or may not have a job. The VA system, it's not big enough to accommodate them. Please, we don't have 1 million hospital beds for 340 or 350 million Americans. Who has heard of anything so insane? This is terrible. So talk to me.
That. One of my coworkers in the FBI died, an older man. He died of Agent Orange.
Oh.
And they would not even give treatment to our own military veterans for having lied to them about being under this horrible toxic defoliant that they spread. And it obviously, yes, it killed a lot of Vietnamese. You know what? It also killed a lot of veterans. And then they got denied treatment. Oh, no, that's not a thing. It took years and years for that to finally change. The same thing is happening with other forms of cancer. Biden's own son died because he was close to a burn pit. And you try to get treatment afterwards. And a lot of times we've had a big scandal here in Minnesota about, I've only seen a few of these news stories, but there was a doctor, a veteran affairs doctor, and she was denying treatment. I don't know, maybe she thought she was saving the government money or something, denying treatment. And certainly treatment for post-traumatic stress is also mental health. But you do see, even now, not all the way back from Vietnam, you see a lot of homeless veterans. Mm-hmm. And you can just imagine the betrayal that they feel. And, and again, depression is not sensible. once you get into this kind of, serious depression, it's not going to be logical and make sense factually, etc. But what people are left with, and I think this happens when you've been trained and desensitized and made to believe that killing is the answer. And so when you're told, this is the earliest indoctrination into the military, that our military that went into Iraq, they had remember 9/11 at all the bases. There were signs up. That was a huge lie, because Iraq had nothing to do with 9/11. And so when they were made to believe that if they killed Iraqis and or took out the Saddam Hussein government, that somehow was helping secure us against terrorism. And as I just mentioned, a lot of this was just the opposite. Saddam was the enemy. He was an actual political enemy of bin Laden and Al-Qaeda. Just because there's different, the Shiites and all this stuff, but he was not in league with bin Laden. The ones who were in league with bin Laden and Al-Qaeda, going all the way back to Charlie Wilson's war in Afghanistan, was the United States. We actually were using the extremists. We were using the Al-Qaeda extremists both in Chechnya and in Afghanistan to, quote, fight the Russians. And so, at the end of a Charlie Wilson war movie, it ends on this note where they give Charlie Wilson a medal, the CIA. The CIA puts him on the wall of honor and gives him a medal because he helped the Mujahideen win the war in Afghanistan. Well, the last chapter of that film is 9/11. It's the Al-Qaeda, bin Laden people flying into the Trade Center, and they cut that last thing out because, again, they have to have a narrative. And when this backfires, and I would say that all of these mass shootings are a form of blowback and backfiring. When that happens, they cannot tell the truth about it. It's just like in the FBI, when the FBI was operating Whitey Bulger. Whitey Bulger was an Irish mobster who was murdering a lot of people in Boston. And for 20 years, the FBI agents in Boston were operating Whitey Bulger. Now, when a judge
what does that mean? They were operating him.
It means that they used him as their asset or informant. So informant is somebody that you protect. The FBI protects its own informants. And so Bulger, because he was Irish mobster, he could give information on his enemies, the Italian mob. And so, open him up as an informant, protect him for 20 years. But he also was the leader of the Irish mob. So this is completely wrong. And it was only discovered, by the way, because a judge pried into the files. This was an unusually curious judge. Normally the FBI can say, you can't look at our files, our informant files. But he was being operated, and the agents who operated him, one was already deceased, but there were at least 3 or 4. I think basically the whole office and even headquarters knew this. And the one guy, the main case agent, he got like 10, 20 years in prison for operating Whitey Bulger. So Whitey Bulger, though, is a well-known example of how this works, because you're trying to use proxy forces. And in Afghanistan, going back to bin Laden, he was the proxy force that the United States was using to fight against the Russians. Just the same as now, we are using these, really some of them, not all of them, but some of them, terrible neo-Nazis in Ukraine to fight Russia. And then the other one recently, and again, this hypocrisy, you don't need me to be, this is out there if you pay any attention at all and you don't just listen to the narrative. We used one of the heads of Al-Qaeda and ISIS. He was the head of both of them. I think he actually was involved in beheadings, killing of Americans. The CIA had put a $10 million bounty on this so-called high-level Al-Qaeda terrorist. His last name is al-Jolani. And guess what? We just took the bounty, the reward off, And now we're going to meet with him, and he's our best buddy in Syria.
How does it happen? No, no. This is a lot for me to comprehend, because these enemies, we go to war with them. We go to war over them. And then they become our best friends, or were they our friends all along?
Yeah, and it's full circle. Think about this. This has already happened once. This isn't the first time. I used to talk a lot about Charlie Wilson's war and say 9/11 was blowback. 9/11 was blowback for what the U.S. did. And actually, even Hamas was helped. Netanyahu helped create Hamas. The reason is, when you have your political goals to control, to maybe grab, like in Israel's case, to grab land, to push out the Palestinians, all of the things they want to do, you will, quote unquote, make deals with the devil. And that's what they said about Whitey Bulger. We have to make a deal with the devil. That's kind of the euphemistic way of rationalizing that you are working with some of the worst extremists. And we're doing that. The goals, by the way, I think it's a fool's errand. It's not working. It's not even working what the United States, NATO, and Israel are doing. The Western Empire, it's backfiring on many, many levels. And one of the levels it's backfiring on that we're talking about right now is this violence, internal domestic violence, that now is increased because of thinking that war is the answer, and having, it's not just, by the way, a war. Remember Colin Powell? He said we should only, after Vietnam, his Colin Powell doctrine, we should only go to war for a very short, limited, and it has to be an end to it. There has to be a way that we can, quote unquote, win the war very quickly. Well, that all changed after 9/11. John McCain, Lindsey Graham, by the way, Amy Klobuchar, Lindsey Graham, and John McCain were the three, what did they call them? The three amigos. They went to Ukraine to help start the war there on Ukraine. They shook their fists and said, we're going to war on Russia, and you Ukrainians, we're going to back you up and everything. That was Klobuchar that did that with John McCain and Lindsey Graham. Anyway, when you get into where they call John McCain, when he ran for president, way back whenever, he said, it's not a war we're going to win quickly. It's going to be a war for 100 years. That is his quote. We are going to war for the next 100 years. I thought to myself, is that a good thing to say when you're running for president? You're telling people that you're going to have war for 100 years. Of course, he didn't win. He didn't win. And we made banners up, and we had banners that said, not another 100 years, but you know what? And that's not only are people who are military veterans, but there's a lot of people that you've turned them into this violent prone wannabes. Some of the shootings, I want to say that nightclub, there are the nightclub shooter in Florida, they were wannabe military. And so they wanted to, and there's an argument that some of these shooters are attracted to serving in wars because they already were inclined to like violence. So there's an argument that there's a lot of, as I said from the start, this isn't a simple thing, but at least you need to start the questioning and the dialogue about the root causes here. And before we end, you can ask more questions, but I do want to end on three more optimistic, hopeful notes for 2025. And I had to make a special effort to come up with these three. I have three of them. I've seen them today in different emails. One is, I think, beginning January 8th. And this is really good. 400 peace and anti-genocide groups are combining in Washington, D.C. to try to lobby Congress not to continue arming Israel, to continue this mass killing of children. That I forced myself to watch a couple, these kids are freezing to death. I mean, I can only stomach a certain amount of it. I almost get sick to my stomach looking at what's going on. And yet here in Minnesota, most of our elected representatives have voted, including the one down here in my district, Angie Craig. She's really pro-genocide. She's extremely. She'll say she's not, but she has voted every time. By the way, only a few. She's with a few Democrats who voted with all the Republicans to continue the billions of dollars to Israel and for the armaments. And so here's my second hopeful thing. I just learned of this. It may be a couple weeks old. There's a guy, he's a peace activist out in California, Norman Solomon. Have you heard of him?
He's been on the show many
Okay.
times. Absolutely.
Well, to his credit, Norman Solomon in Roots Action organized 500 taxpayers to file a class action lawsuit against their elected congressman in the 10 northern counties in California. I mean, I'm not allowed. What's the word? I don't have a license to practice law. I went to law school, but I don't have a current license to practice law in Minnesota. But I want to do that. I want to replicate what Norman Solomon did. And actually, yes, Sue Klobuchar. There's a clause in the Constitution called the tax and spend clause. And it's supposed to be reasonable and whatever. So it's kind of a novel theory, but they're trying to use this clause, tax and spend authority, for a class action suit. And you know what? I think we could get a few hundred. We might even be able to get more than 500 litigants to sign as a class action against our elected representatives.
What would that do?
Oh, obviously, it would keep them. Here's what it would do. There are laws on the books already. It is illegal. It is not just illegal to arm Israel. It is highly illegal. There are at least 3 or 4 major domestic laws, not just international law against genocide, not just international law. We have the Leahy laws that were passed by Leahy that said if a country is committing human rights abuses, you can't arm it. There's another law about a nuclear nation. Israel is a rogue nation that never signed the Non-Proliferation Treaty, and they secretly develop nuclear weapons that helps them intimidate all of the Mideast.
No one ever wants to talk about that. Indeed, that was one of the last public statements that Bishop Desmond Tutu, the Nobel Prize winner, Peace Prize winner, he said, "Stop with the deceit. Their nuclear power. Why does that matter? And why doesn't anyone want it? When you mentioned, the only person who I heard, one of the few people who I heard mention declare them a nuclear power publicly was Jimmy Carter."
Yeah, exactly. I think there's been a couple of, slips? A couple of public officials have slipped. Once in a while, they've slipped and admitted that Israel has nuclear weapons, but they won't officially admit it. And the reason, it's very important. It's extremely important that they don't officially admit it, because then the law comes into place that we could not be sending military arms to Israel right off the bat. And, it does allow Israel to commit this genocide. That you'd say, well, why nuclear? Why does that jive with the genocide? Because they're allowed to intimidate the whole Mideast, Iran and everybody else, that we have nukes and, you can't have them, but we have them. And therefore we can control the Mideast. And if we want to kill all the Palestinians, you can't stop us. I mean, there's a lot. This is so important, the admitting of Israel having nuclear weapons. And as I said, we've had high-level public officials that have slipped up and admitted it, but it just hasn't been done officially. So there are laws. Those are the laws, but there's even a couple more about import-export law. I don't know them all. So when you file the class action, you're on very solid legal ground. That class action lawsuit isn't something that's made up. It wasn't difficult because those are it's a very solid legal basis for saying that that Klobuchar and Angie Craig and all the rest of these people that voted to arm Israel basically committed crimes. They're committing crimes to do that.
Well, hold on. Solomon Harris said, who can enforce these laws without AIPAC destroying your life?
Yeah, AIPAC's. Yeah, that's true. AIPAC's very powerful. They have a lot of money, and they've taken out many of our best elected leaders. I mean, we don't have too many in Washington. I think Washington is kind of a cesspool because guess what? They all did put their hands out and they all accepted this dirty, dirty money from AIPAC and other Israel lobbies. And after they do that, guess what? If you take a bribe, if you're a public official, I used to help work public corruption cases in the FBI. I don't know if you remember this because it goes way back, but we even had some Minneapolis City Council cases where it was just minor bribery. It was very minor. But, we worked those cases because once you put your hand out and you take that money and it goes in your pocket, guess what? You are bought and sold. And that's what our government is now. It's very, very corrupted by the big money, not just from AIPAC, but from the military industrial complex, from big pharma, from a lot of these big corporate. I will say Jimmy Carter, it's an oligarchy. He's right. It's an oligarchy. And the few good ones, we had some good ones. You know what? When if they say no to the corruption, they're forced out. And Jamal Bowman was just recently forced out. I mean, there's a few, and they have so much money. But you know what? It's got to start somewhere. So I don't think the answer is for people to be intimidated. As you know, Martin Luther King Jr., if anyone could have been intimidated by J. Edgar Hoover and etc., these were brave people. And Julian Assange, more recently, he was threatened. The United States even threatened one of the United Nations personnel. Forget the chemical weapons guy. They've threatened to kill him. I mean, but you got to be brave, and people have to stand up and say, you know what, try it or whatever. And maybe they can. Yeah, they're powerful. I wouldn't deny that. And I think I'm saying things we can do. So creative things we could do. We could all try to file a class action lawsuit. January 8th, I think 400 groups. That's encouraging. 400 different groups. I think probably our Women Against Military Madness is one of them. Have seen through the hypocrisy, have seen through the lies, and they're going to be lobbying. They said let's swarm Congress and lobby. One of the ways AIPAC got so much money is they were able to organize people to go into the offices on the Hill. And yeah, that's one of the ways. They would have these big conferences, basically pep rallies. AIPAC would have a big pep rally. Israel has to control, blah, blah, blah. Everybody's clapping, and then they'd send them off to Congress. And I'm hoping that the peace movement can do something similar, that people can actually explain. And I think the best way to explain this is the blowback. It's exactly, it's not like this is achieving anything that we're doing. It's hurting us. It's hurting the United States. And there are things that we could be doing to improve the world through, we could increase prosperity. We could help the nations who do. Let's say there is a nation with a dictatorship. It's not a good answer to say we're going to come in by violence and take out the dictatorship. Because guess what? It just turns into what they said after the French Revolution. They called it the reign of terror. Yes. That's what you had in Libya. That's what you had in Iraq. You had the million people get killed after we took out Saddam Hussein. So it's not a good answer. But there are ways that we could spread more, fair democracy structures throughout the world. I frankly don't think our government's interested in that. I think that a lot of times our government is more interested in bolstering a Jolani who actually is a terrorist, because maybe he's not their favorite, but I think a lot of times they see that dictator, strongman, as easier to control. And actually, I've even heard professors say Madeleine Albright, she went around saying that the answer to the to the instability in the world is democracy. And if I have to, go to war for democracy, use the weapons. Well, no, she's absolutely wrong. We need to bring democracy through other methods, not through the way that we're doing it. And
but didn't she say that it was worth it?
Yeah, she said killing 500,000 kids was worth it. Yeah. Yeah.
No. Don't
Guess what?
so fast. That was so. I just thought I don't know any other way. It's wicked and cruel.
And it wasn't democracy.
No,
that's not. What people still revere Madeleine Albright, even though that quote, she didn't think before she said it, because she was telling the truth when she said it. The thing is, that was the truth out of her mouth when she said, but we think it's worth it. And that is exactly what Blinken says about the poor Gazans who are freezing and starving to death. He says the same thing. He just is smart enough to not admit that he thinks it's worth it, because he's on he's pro-Israel, and he's on the side of Israel's genocide. Essentially, he's on that side. So the thing is, I've heard professors, these would be professors of international law and politics and stuff, and even they have said that if we want to control the world, it would be better for the United States to have all Saudi dictators throughout the world, because then we just have to control that dictator, and they can do that through bribery or Epstein-like blackmail, all different things. They can control these people by spying and all kinds of ways. And then we don't have to worry about the people, the democracy. And that's really the problem of China and Russia and some of these other countries. We're having trouble controlling. Now it's a handful of these countries that want to have their own sovereignty. They want to have their own economic system. The BRICS nations, they want to have their own currencies, and we will not allow that. And then we say, well, we have to have war on these countries. And this is what I'm going back to. I got one more good thing, if I can think of it here. I had 3 things that were all good. But one of the things we have to hope for 2025 is that none of these crazy power mongers in Washington who think they can win nuclear war actually go ahead and press the button, or an accidental mistake allows one side or the other to press the button.
But Colleen Rowley, there have been reports bombs have been dropped in Gaza that have been so powerful that they have registered as earthquakes. I mean, they've registered on the Richter scale. There have been reports that many nukes have been detonated already. Well, I'm looking at the reports like right now. I mean, I've been reading about them, and what is stunning is when you talk about blowback, and we're talking with Colleen Rowley, one of Time Magazine's Persons of the Year, 2002, but Women Against Military Madness. I can't let you go until you tell me about that. I'm trying to figure out, everyone, and please pass the show along, like and share. And I see my colleague, Perry Small, who just retired from WVON, sending you so much love. I have to move my show around, but I'm on, one of the stations I'm on is AM 950 Radio, Colleen Rowley's home station up in Minneapolis, St. Paul. It's the voice of progressive Minnesota. And because of some work that I'm going to be doing, I'm going to have to be in the afternoon, but typically I'm in the morning period from 7 to 9. But I do hope that you'll continue to tune in, and I'd love to have you on someday. But I just want to know the blowback for us internationally before I deal with the domestic. I need you to help us to, because many of us don't see what's happening out there. Because when I see this young 42-year-old man, there is something that he has seen. He's in IT. He's in the military. Many of our military, many of our young people in the military have a global view. They don't just see things domestically. You know, they travel around the world. They have to intercept intelligence from around the world. Help me to understand, what could have happened to this young man. When they talk about the radicalization, I mean, I don't want to keep you too long, but I need you to help. I mean, because I'm looking at the news right now, and they set up the barricades that you talked about, that you decried a little bit earlier, all over New Orleans. And the challenge that New Orleans has is that you've got the Sugar Bowl tonight. I remember going there more than 20 years ago when my brother played for UV. Yay, hey, Cavalier. And my whole family went down there for the Sugar Bowl. It was exciting. But now they're going to have the Super Bowl. And one of the things that was the fallout of 9/11 was it seemed like it was an excuse to take our civil liberties away that we've never gotten back.
Yeah.
I mean, our freedom of movement, our freedom of assembly, our freedom to speak, dissent.
That's right. And the censorship has come on, and the whole reason is to keep this going. Because again, if people ask the hard questions, a lot of people were censored, and even on social media, Twitter, it became worse and worse and worse. And it's worse than civil liberties. It's actually the law. The Bill of Rights is the Constitution. There's no higher law in the United States than the Constitution. And the First Amendment, well, many people would argue, is the pillar. It's the pillar of the Constitution.
Why? Why is it the pillar?
Because if you don't have discussion, if you have people telling from top down, telling you we're doing this and no questions, if and ands and buts, that's basically, it's basically Nazi Germany. No one's allowed to even answer. And you know what? It makes you dumb. It makes everyone dumb because, again, no one even know some of this stuff. People don't even know these things in the past. I was at our family gathering over the Christmas, and I brought up My Lai massacre. And I said something about, I don't remember. I said, well, that guy didn't even get punished. I don't remember what I said. I said, that they massacred 500 people. What? A bunch of people, a bunch of family members look at me, never heard of it. And they had never,
when I was a child.
No, I know. And they're a little younger. Some of them were younger than me, but still. Actually, now 9/11, this business of how the United States was helping arm what became bin Laden and the Mujahideen. These were Saudi Wahhabi extremists. And this is what became Al Qaeda. And you know what? I bet you wouldn't even find 5% of people under, maybe less than that. If they're under like 40 years old, they wouldn't know the Charlie Wilson War led to 9/11. They wouldn't know that. They wouldn't know that it was the same group of people that we had previously armed. There was a PBS special. There was a Frontline documentary about this once, but there was very limited. It's very limited. They never mention this. And especially now with having put Jolani into power, who is a former Al Qaeda. They do not want people to mention this. And then if you say it, people look at you quizzically, like, what are you talking about? I've never heard of this. Well, Lester Holt doesn't bring it up at night. And no,
leave Lester Holt alone.
I think, what?
I'm really.
No, I figure he's making enough money that my little criticism doesn't much matter to him. And,
but he needs it. I mean, look, I've met him many times. He used to be in Chicago. He's a great guy. That has nothing to do with how corporate media are shaping. They're not being used to give us information. They're shaping a narrative, and no one is watching. I mean, they're about to sell MSNBC, for heaven's sake, and the joke could be that Elon Musk could buy it. I hope that doesn't happen, but it could in this environment. I mean, this is crazy. Everybody were on AM 950 radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota, talking with Colleen Rowley about everything. I don't even know what to say. We're talking about everything, 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 and this has been such a blessing to speak with you today, everybody. Like and share the show. Like and share the show. I'm on Blue Sky at santitajackson.bsky.social, at Santita J on X, and Santita Jackson and Friends, and the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. Boy, are you giving us so much information today, and I'm getting so many people were thanking you for the truth that you're bringing today, because we're not getting that, and we're not hearing that. At least I don't know if these gentlemen knew each other from, these poor, both of them are dead. The gentleman in Las Vegas whose car exploded, or he blew it up in front of the Trump property, or um, or this young man in New Orleans, but they were on the same base.
Yeah, I don't know.
That no, but they don't mention that. I just need you to help me with that, because
Yeah,
it's something.
I I think so far they don't have
And I'm
any.
taking it back to the First Amendment that you talked about.
Yeah, so far they don't have any information that they knew each other. However, it's scarier if you think that independently two guys on the same day would come up with a rather different creative ideas. And the guy in Las Vegas, if you think about the symbolism involved in bombing with a Tesla vehicle, Elon Musk Tesla vehicle in front of a Trump tower in Las Vegas. Now, that almost, in a way, could be an iconic entry into 2025. If you think about it, that's amazing. Did he have a gripe against Trump and Elon Musk? I mean, maybe he used them. I mean, it's hard to say, but in any event, I think you go back to the First Amendment, and the answer, it's also the third good thing. More and more people are not drinking the Kool-Aid.
So what
They
do you
you,
mean?
you can see more and more people are listening to the Santita Jackson show. I don't know what your viewership is, but I see online that the numbers of people that are in different alternative media, and it's not that independent media is right about everything, but you know what? At the very least, they're a little more independent. And again, they don't have that corporate money coming in that's framing the narrative. And so I think that you see more and more people that are going to independent media, and you also see more people that are not. They're leaving the New York Times. They're leaving the CNNs because they know that they've been lied to many times by by these big major corporate media outfits. So that's actually good. That's a good sign. I mean, some people would say, well, where does that lead us to? Because now people say, who do we trust? And I agree, it's difficult. It's difficult to find the truth. I keep telling some friends on Facebook, the truth is a zigzag line. You're not going to join any partisan group and have that leader of any partisan group give you the full and complete truth. Caitlin Johnstone recently wrote, truth is a pursuit. It's not, you don't conquer it. You're never going to be able to have it. The similar thing was said by Pete Seeger. In his song, Pete Seeger says, the truth is like a rabbit hiding in the bramble bush. And you can kind of see it, and it's in there, but you can't see it very clearly. That's right. It's a pursuit.
Come on, Dylan. It's blowing in the wind.
Yeah.
Come on. I mean, let's keep on going. Let's keep on going with this piece.
I think if you're not blinded by partisanship, because that does blind people. That's how you get Nazism. That's how you get Zionism. If you're not blinded by the group think, it's by the way how you got the Challenger to blow up, because the engineers were arguing that night to cancel the Challenger. Right. But the group think of NASA, they all know it's fine. So if you are smart enough,
but I don't want people to go past that, because I saw the CNN special, and I mean, their documentary on what happened, and it was heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't about the Challenger, it was about another failed mission. And you saw these families who were absolutely devastated because they did not have the space to ask questions.
Yeah.
And that for me is what's devastating now. I don't know what these young men saw, excuse me, but they've seen something. It's just like Pat Tillman.
Hmm.
Pat Tillman left a promising NFL career. He said he was so fired up by what had happened on 9/11, and I understand that. Although I felt that there was something that wasn't quite right in the water that day, because they already had been lobbying on the news at the end of the day. I thought this is something. Well, look, I am a skeptic, just given my background. You know that. That having been said, he there were things that he saw over there, Colleen Rowley, that made him reach out to Noam Chomsky. While he was there, he said, "When I get home, I need to talk with you." Because of what he had seen, he went from, "I'm leaving the NFL because I'm going to get these bad guys," to Noam Chomsky. And then as he's riding to some destination, while his brother is in the car behind him, he gets killed by friendly fire.
Yeah. You
And
know,
his brother jumps out the car and sees his dying, then dead brother. Colleen Rowley, come on.
and
Help
and
me
they
with that.
and they kept it a secret for an entire year, even from Tillman's family. Yeah, absolutely. Daniel Ellsberg is very similar. Yeah,
Oh,
you can use that old what do you call it? The old Bible story of Paul on the way to Damascus, ready to
oh yeah.
persecute the Christians, and he gets struck by lightning. And it's not exactly a strike by lightning. It's not that quick. But I've talked at length with Daniel Ellsberg, and
Mm.
it resonated with me. Little by little, people do start to see through this, and that's actually the hopeful thing that we're talking about here. I think the American public as a whole, now, if they can somehow convince us that the answer is to kill more people, that our problems in the United States, our economy, everything that we witness day in and day out, the schools, everything going on. If they can somehow convince us that we just have to go to war with China and Russia, and that's the answer to the problems. But I think a majority of Americans don't agree with that anymore. And when a Rachel Maddow goes out there and tries to argue differently, I think that more and more people, and politicians, obviously, it's not just the media, it's our politicians. I think more and more people are seeing through. I think even the MAGA crowd,
Oh
the Make
yeah.
America Great people,
Oh
who
yeah.
believed, many of them did want to end the perpetual war. I think a majority of them believe Trump's telling them, promising them that he would at least end the Ukraine war. And
Mhm.
I think some of them will rebel. I think
Well,
that
we're
there
going
will.
to see it tomorrow. We're going to see it on Friday because Speaker Johnson's, he does not have a secure spot. I mean, I'm talking to members of Congress right now, and they're saying, "Oh no, no, no! There is a hard faction within the Republican Party who feel betrayed." Is that like the word of the day? And they're pushing. I mean, because even when we look at what happened with Vivek Ramaswamy, Elon Musk, and the H-1B visas, but
Yes.
people have ignored. That's at the top, though. At the bottom, you've got the 10th Partnership for Refugees. Tony Blinken, our Secretary of State, signed a memo of understanding with the creator of Kobani yogurt, 300 companies in 2022, November of 2022, to bring in refugees so that they could work for cheap. It's more than 400 companies now. The first place I saw that was in a libertarian blog.
Mhm.
Well, because I read everything. I'm like, look, you guys, I believe in God, but I do not. I'm agnostic about where I get the places where I find my information. I want the information. I'm not going to get stuff. I don't look at MSNBC and go, who? I don't look at Fox and go, who? I don't look at CNN. I don't look at any of them. And I get the information from them, and then I find out for myself, Colleen Rowley, because I need to know. Now I realize everybody doesn't have that time, But come on, you see this fight with Elon Musk, and you're right, in front of the Trump property, his his vehicle that looks like the Hummer that they used in South Africa to frighten the black population, by the way. I mean, that's what it looked like to the people, to the blacks in South Africa when they were riding through the black townships. That's what that car looks like. And then at the bottom, I mean, we're seeing the same thing. I never thought I'd live to see the day, Colleen Rowley, when I'd hear white men called lazy and dumb by another white man.
Yep.
Is it me?
Yeah, there's some rifts developing because it's easy to make promises, and it's quite another thing to and then of course the special interests, the so-called special interests, and certainly Musk and a lot of others have special interests.
But
And
where do you see that? Where do you see this going? I mean, because I just see Americans increasingly feeling betrayed, and I'm wondering where that is going to go. Because I mean, I pray that everything's going to be okay at the Sugar Bowl tonight. I pray that everything's going to be okay, that people will be safe at the Super Bowl in a few weeks. But increasingly, I feel people are getting desperate.
yeah, and it doesn't. We need to face reality. And again, these are hard questions, but they have to be asked and they have to be discussed. It's not just the barricades, and they cannot keep us
they
safe.
won't work.
By having perpetual war on, the rest of the world. That's not going to help people. And there has to be bravery. There has to be some bravery, even at the top amongst some of these people. There are people, otherwise good people that realize this. I remember this was already a few years ago. One of these top billionaire guys, he gave a TED talk, and he said, you know what? We have got to be less greedy, and we've got to be we have to have a little more morality, us billionaires, because otherwise they're going to be coming after us with pitchforks. That was a TED talk, and it got a few million views, and I thought to myself, good for him. He's telling the truth about this. Henry Ford made his cars cheaper because he wanted his workers to be able to buy that Model T Ford. I mean, some of this is self-interest. If you drop a nuclear bomb, you talk about blowback, the worst blowback, it's actually literally blowback. If Israel thinks they can nuke Gaza, guess what? The winds blow and they're all given radiation. It's literally blowback. And of course, it destroys, if it goes any further than limited nuclear, the whole world is destroyed. It's a complete and utter blowback, which we used to call Armageddon. I mean, people have to think this is like the dumbest thing in the world that we're allowing these leaders, again, because, I'm a Republican and it's Trump, or I'm a Democrat and it's Harris or Angie Craig. You got to get past that. And as you said, you have to read across all of the spectrum. And then, yes, none of them are going to be completely correct. And none of them are going to be completely wrong. But take the parts and the insights. I like to read articles and pieces on Substack and Rumble, which are pretty independent. Rumble and Substack and certain different sites. And I like to read people who are smarter than me. First of all, smarter than me, number one. And number two, the people who have a track record for having been correct. Not the ones who have been proven wrong. Not the ones who lied us into Iraq. How can people be rehabilitating Bush after he's the one, and Liz Cheney and Dick Cheney? How can they be rehabilitating these? The Democrats rehabilitating Bush and Cheney. How can they be doing that?
They're about to give her a medal.
Yeah. After their track record for them is terrible. So when you're reading and when you say, who do I trust? You have got to take the track record and the potential bias. If I'm reading something out of Russia, I'm going to understand it could be biased. I have that in mind already if I'm reading something from a different Okay, but take that into consideration. And when you're reading and you're formulating, pursuing the truth, you have to take these things into consideration. That's actually what an open source analyst does. Our intelligence analysts, they call them open source because basically they're just good cognitive readers, and they don't fall into the trap of being duped by any one site. They read across the board, and then they have a much better understanding of the truth if you read across the board.
Well, do you see, I mean, how do you see, because I'm looking at the reaction to Luigi Mangione, and I was watching an excerpt from Saturday Night Live, and he had just been arrested, I guess maybe a couple of days before. And, they have their headlines, their news segment. And I could see that the troop member from SNL was shocked that the audience cheered Luigi Mangione. I mean, he was I think they might have expected a few ripples of applause, but the audience cheered this young man. No one is cheering the killing of a human being, a husband and a father, a son, a friend. No one is doing that. But this insurance company, his baseline, Brian Thompson's base salary was $1 million a year. How did he make $10 million? $9 million came from turning you down for coverage.
Yeah. And not only that, both he and Helmsley were investigated for violations of monopoly.
Now, who's
and
Helmsley?
They were investigated for insider trading.
Now, who is Helmsley?
Stephen Helmsley is the co-leader of United Health.
Now, he is the person that was over Thompson.
Yep, he's even over Brian Thompson. Brian Thompson was his, what do you call him when you're like at the knees? You're the
second.
The mentor. Helmsley would have been the mentor to Brian Thompson.
That's right.
And he's even more wealthy. Has a big mansion, or at least he did a few years ago on our Lake Minnetonka. And the people in healthcare, we actually have healthcare providers in the Twin Cities who are in economic problem straits right now because United will not pay the health. These are the doctors that United Healthcare will deny the doctors to be paid, not just the people who are the clients, but there's all kinds of, I've heard this from health professionals. United is the worst. They deny 30% of claims. And this actually hurts the healthcare providers. And I was arguing with somebody and I said, well, a lot of the insurance companies do the same thing. And they said, well, yeah, but United is really in a class of its own. They're way worse than even the next worst. The next worst health insurance isn't even close to United. And United, I think it's even caused some healthcare providers to go bankrupt here in the Twin Cities. Yeah, so it's bad. Yeah, United. No, Luigi Mangione, do not have to agree with his method of addressing the problem. He had a very poor, I guess, bad method, extremist method of addressing the problem. But he wasn't wrong that United Healthcare is really been hurting and probably leading to the deaths of many people. He wasn't wrong about that part of it. I used to give my ethics talks, I used to use the Unabomber Ted Kaczynski. And I used to say, and it's counterintuitive because we all hated, and the FBI, we had a multi-million-dollar reward for, and I got calls all the time about the Unabomber, and the FBI was criticized because they couldn't find who was the Unabomber over decades. And so we all obviously were so happy to finally find him and everything. So this is counterintuitive. But the Unabomber, one of his gripes was the way technology, if it was going to continue in this being developed, it was going to dehumanize people. And you know what? I don't think he necessarily was wrong about the way the dangers. I mean, we even now have people with artificial intelligence. We're going to put artificial intelligence on drone bombs. And there are a lot of people now that are very worried. They have basically the same worries as the Unabomber did, only he beat them to the punch. He was worried about this years ago. So it wasn't that he was. Now, I will disagree with his method, sending mail bombs out. I mean, obviously that's a terrible method of dealing with it, but he wasn't wrong. So I guess the key is, if you know a problem, and I would say it's the same thing with some of our mass shooters, you've got to figure out a constructive method. I tried to give a couple of examples, and, having alternative media that allows discussion of the real issues, the real problems, as your show is doing, that is part of the constructive solutions right now. I know it's hard. It's hard in this day and age. You get criticized from all different angles and whatever, and it's not easy. Obviously I've been criticized in the past for trying to explain that 9/11 was not something that had to happen. Mm-hmm. As Robert Mueller was saying, oh, well, we couldn't have prevented 9/11. I was criticized even for saying that. No, we had the intelligence. We should have acted. I was even criticized for saying that 24 years ago. So I know
you get criticized for that today.
Yeah, I know it's difficult for this, but this is the kind of discussion. And again, you don't have to agree with everything, but it's the kind of discussion that needs to be had. And it's part of the answer. And
well, I mean, we've got to have the discussion, because if we don't, you get New Orleans.
Yeah.
You get Las Vegas.
We're going to get a lot more. We're going to get a lot more.
So?
Yes, we are. Unless they can do something. Again, it's the root cause. The barricades aren't going to. I know I'd hope maybe it will help. Some of these Band-Aid solutions that they come up with, and maybe it will help a little. But it's not, school shootings. None of this is going to end until we deal with what is causing it. It's not a motive out of an Agatha Christie mystery novel. There's a reason. We have a sickness. And most of this can be attributed to a mass depression, people feeling helpless and hopeless. And you know what? We don't see much hope coming out of Washington, D.C., out of our elected leaders. And they had better get with it. I mean, this discussion needs to get to them. We need to tell them, hey, I know you like to live in the mansions. You like to make your billions of dollars or millions of dollars off of, as some of our recent elected leaders have done. But you know what? This is hurting the country, and it's going to hurt everyone. It's going to hurt your own children. I mean, it's fun to live in mansions, and whatever, and get away. Think you've got away with things, but it's not going to be it's not a solution. And maybe we'll get some more people. Maybe we'll get some more Daniel Ellsbergs who will see the light, and actually maybe even on Capitol Hill. I know that sounds naive. I know they've taken a lot of money, but you'd be surprised. It's possible for people to change. So.
Well, I mean, but what is the root? What is it at root? What is our problem? I mean, as we wrap things up,
it's empire. It's imperialism and the notion that the United States can control the world. And by the way, when we do this, we do exactly what we're doing in Syria. We steal the oil. We want to have little children going into dangerous mines and getting important minerals. It's control. It's control. It's what the British Empire and the Spanish Empire, Roman Empire. We've fallen into this. It's the U.S., NATO, Israel, I think, is this. I made a banner. I painted a big orange warning banner back in 2007. I want to say 2007. And it says, "End American Empire before it ends us." And back in 2007, it's on my Google. It's my sign on my Google. "End American Empire before it ends us." And I was thinking about the trajectory already back then, that we're on this trajectory, fool's errand of trying to control the world. And we're trying to do this now with nuclear intimidation. And actually, it could easily turn into worse than nuclear intimidation. So I'm very worried that that's what I'm most worried about. And it's all due to this notion. It's very foolish. It's ignorance and arrogance at the top that think, like your Roman Nero and Caligula and Caesar. This is throughout history. Hitler. I mean, we have had people rise up to the top that think they want to control more of the world. And in the United States has fallen, I'm sorry to say, they've fallen into this mode. They really have. And it's blowing back on the United States itself. There was a series of books written by a former CIA guy. His name was Chalmers Johnson. And he wrote these books even before 9/11. He started to write them. One of them was The Sorrows of Empire. Everyone should get that book. It's an old book now. It was written in like 2000, 2001. The Sorrows of Empire. And that's the real problem. We need to understand respect for the rest of the world, international law. Start following international law. We can't make up our own laws and say we're above the law. No, we have to follow. If we're committing genocide right now, we're helping Israel commit genocide, completely violating the law. You know what? I was in the FBI. I thought I joined the FBI in order to enforce the Constitution and the law. I actually used to teach this. I taught 13 years. I taught FBI agents the constitutional, the Bill of Rights, the Fourth Amendment, the Fifth Amendment. I thought it was all about following the law until you get to this post 9/11 where the law now it just goes up in smoke. And those are the answers. The answers are to go back. We have to respect other countries. We have to follow not only our own constitutional law, but international law.
Do you think we will respect other countries? I mean, because
we aren't. No, we aren't right now. We aren't. No, that's the problem. In those other countries, they can see it. Here in the United States, we're blinded to it because we live here. But why do they, quote unquote, why do they hate us? Obviously, if you're involved in killing, that's the Hatfields and the McCoys. If your own family, Iraqis, I'm surprised the Vietnamese, after what we did in that country, are as nice as they are. I've had family members travel to Vietnam. And the Vietnamese people are very nice. They're trying to encourage tourism. I'm actually surprised that they actually are as nice as they are at this point because of what the United States killed 3 million, et cetera. But people do have memories, and it's not. We're not helping our cause. We're not winning. We claim we want to win hearts and minds. How in the heck can you win hearts and minds in the world by not following the law and not respecting other nations? Can you win hearts and minds? It's not possible. You mentioned that the military kind of understand this a lot. You know what group probably best understands are some of the State Department career people who have become whistleblowers. There's at least 15, 20 that State Department that have resigned. And they speak out all the time. I have some friends. One is Josephine. She was a former, I think, colonel. I think she's a former colonel. She's one of the people that was in the Doctors Against Genocide thing. And they're going to be trying to organize lobbying in Washington, D.C. She's a former colonel. And then there's a lot of former State Department people. Ann Wright's one of my friends. I mean, there's a lot of these, and there's a lot of them who have recently. I'm not going to go to work and help enable a genocide. I'm not going to be able to do this. How can I say the talking points that allow genocide? What's her name? She's really good. This one woman. She was on Democracy Now! A couple of times. She's excellent. She was the spokesperson, trying to tell people that, oh, no, we're just, Israel has a right to self-defense, blah, blah, blah. So, I mean, this is the answer here, getting more people to speak out and to have these discussions, even though they're hard.
Do you think that, well, I mean, before we go, what is the pivot point? What was the pivot point for you to be a whistleblower? What's the pivot point for someone in the State Department to be a whistleblower? Let me just say this as you answer. Getting in the FBI is not an easy thing. You really are vetted. You are the best of the best. The State Department, you're the best of the best. You're the best and the brightest. That's the reality. What turned you? What made you say, wait? Because I mean, I'm going back to 9/11,
Yeah.
and it was everyone was to live in America. We hadn't had COVID. That was shut down. To not see any planes flying overhead. Nothing. America shut down. And let me tell you, I will say this for the first time in my life. I saw white people trying to come to the south side of Chicago. To stay. They were looking for black neighborhoods. Everybody was trying to get out of downtown or areas where they felt vulnerable. I mean, really, what made you say enough?
You
Alina?
know, I wrote this when I did my statement to the Senate Judiciary. I had to justify why you had to tell the truth. And I came up with 3 or 4 reasons why. Because why? I was being criticized for telling the truth because it was hurting, that it hurts the cause. They have this idea that ends justify the means. And so you have to keep quiet about certain things. And little by little, even at the end of my career in the FBI, I had seen the Whitey Bulger fiasco, and I saw the cover up of the Whitey Bulger. Instead of dealing with it honestly and saying that we can't be operating the heads of the mafia, the mob, and killers like this, the FBI has to have a rule that you cannot operate these people that are murderers. Okay, instead of dealing with it, they covered it up. And the same thing was happening with 9/11. The same thing was happening, and 3,000 people died. And those families, I wrote, this was in my statement, I said, the families will never stop wondering. And then Mueller wanted to cover it up. Robert Mueller, who everybody hoped was going to go take after Trump, and he helped cover up 9/11 and until he could no longer do it. And, they still probably, by the way, let's hope Trump releases some of these files because there's probably still some stuff being covered up. But they were covering up a lot of it. They covered up for 20 years, even after my memo led to some of it coming out. They still blacked out 20 pages that showed Saudi Arabia was involved. They still blacked that out. So that's why this is what is the truth. The truth does matter. And if you are not going to be a whistleblower and tell the truth, Daniel Ellsberg's a great example, you're never going to fix it. It's hard to deal with the truth. It hurts people's feelings. People get mad at you, all kinds of things. I frankly didn't know I could be fired. And I will say I was naive about that. A lot of the later whistleblowers not only got fired, but they got imprisoned. And I was very naive. A lot of them. I mean, John Kiriakou on the torture whistleblowing, Julian, a whole bunch, pretty much everyone who became a whistleblower after me, almost all of them at least got fired, and and then actually also got imprisoned. And so in my case, there was talk of that. I did not realize that I was subjecting you know why? Because I believed at the time, I didn't think I could be fired. I only had about 1.5 years to make it to retirement. And maybe, you know what? Maybe if I'd had the reality that they could have fired me, maybe I would have also backed down and kept my head down. I'm not sure. I honestly, when someone called me from headquarters and told me that they overheard Mueller and Ashcroft talking if they could fire me because they were on the guard detail. And they had overheard the conversation about, I go, what? Are you kidding? Just for wanting to the 3,000 people who died to know a little bit of the truth. And they were already talking about firing. And then they couldn't fight. I think the reason they couldn't fire me was because 4 senators, it took 4, Wellstone, Dayton, our 2 Minnesota senators, Dayton, Wellstone, and then the heads of the Senate Judiciary, Grassley and Leahy, 4 of them wrote to Ashcroft and said, you can't fire her. That's
And
what
we still don't know what happened to Paul Wellstone. And he was the head of my father's campaign in 88, was a big supporter in 84. He managed it in 88, and it was devastating because he stood against the invasion of Iraq.
Yep.
10 toes down. And it was his wife and daughter were
Yeah,
killed. I
wife,
mean,
daughter, three staffers. There was seven of them. I knew his chief of staff here. I knew his chief of staff very well. I actually knew Paul Wellstone a little bit. I didn't know him real well, but I knew him a little bit, and I knew his chief of staff. Yeah, it was very, very sad, and yeah, he was brave. You know what? That's the kind of bravery we got to get back in Congress.
oh yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, but you know what? When you go to Congress, I have to tell you, I started there when I was in college as an intern. You get there, and this was in the 80s, in the late 80s. First people who come for you, APAC.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they knew you who you were. They had a package for you, and they were very friendly. And they wanted to know if they had a whole series of seminars for you to attend. I mean, they're very organized. I'm not mad. I mean, I just don't agree, but they understand the system as it is presently constructed, and this is what they do. Big pharma. I mean, but we're watching Americans squeezed out. I mean, the family farmer is being tossed to the side. Bill Gates is buying up all the land, and then China, they're buying up our land. I mean, how does this happen in the United States? I mean, Colleen Rowley, where do we go from here? Just help me before we go.
Well, we got to demand the truth from every angle that we can possibly do so. You know, the toxic things that are in the pesticides. I mean, the things that are causing autism across the board. There's a million questions, and you know what? It actually is all hurting the United States. And if we're going to have any chance of writing this, you got to stop the bribery in Congress. That's a root cause. It is hard to convince somebody who's pocketing money, very hard to convince them to go against their own greed and self-interest. There's a lot of things that we can do, though. I've talked to couple 2-3, and I mean, start there. And let's keep our fingers crossed for the next year that we can get some. There may be some. I just keep hoping that there could be some brave people. Wellstone is a great model to hold
Absolutely.
up. I wish more people would have held the Wellstone model up to Amy Klobuchar. She's gone along with all of this war stuff full boat, and very different, completely different than what Paul Wellstone would have done. Obviously, his track record was standing up to it. Hers was completely to go along with it because she thinks that's what makes her powerful.
But it doesn't. I mean, more and more Americans are losing faith in this system. And the thing is, you got to look at the two-party system, Colleen Rowley, because when you get to Congress, I've had two brothers who served there. You get a bill, a 6-figure bill from the Democratic Party. I mean, no, every year.
Yeah.
You got to pay them. I mean, if you don't pay up, you can't get on committees, which means you can't deliver for your people. So when they talk about congresspersons not working, I'm like, no, you all don't even understand. That's why I try to share things, Colleen Rowley. That's why I'm so honored to have you, because you help us to step through the looking glass and see how it really works. You're like, wait a minute, I was a year and a half. I can't believe I remember reading you were a year and a half from retirement. And these people let you go. I don't understand that. That's so cruel. It's just me. So what happened? Did you get any pension? What did?
Yeah, I was lucky. I made it to retirement. I stepped down from legal, which was a GS-14. So my pension got reduced by some amount because I stepped down, and I think it was the only way I could have made it to retirement. I had to make it to my birthday, and I about a year and a half, and I made it. But I was one of the last people who did. Going back to the incentives about this big money and this power and stuff. I think that the other model, the one model is Paul Wellstone standing up to the perpetual war stuff. The other one is Jimmy Carter.
Yeah.
He went back to his peanut farm. He didn't go into the mansion and whatever. He wrote some books. He went and hammered houses. that is, I will say that's a good thing about the corporate media coverage right now. There's some bad, they're leaving out some things, but the good thing is that model of him being a very powerful president and not doing what some of our most recent presidents have done, which is and Congress,
Yes.
using it as a stepping stone to become wealthy and powerful. They use that little thing as a stepping stone.
He did that. He did it very differently. I mean,
Mhm.
before you go, your impressions of Jimmy Carter. I mean, because I wonder, he's so lauded, of course, in death, but he's beloved. My father said that he was going to be in 1980, Colleen Rowley. I shared this in the last hour. He, Jimmy Carter, I don't think many of us remember how unpopular he was just as he was, even in the spring. I mean, because you had every night, 5 nights a week, shall I say, da 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 da. You have
Yeah.
Ted Koppel, day 1 million, day 2 million, the hostages, and that made him a superstar in journalism in America. And it made every day Carter was diminished.
Yeah.
Every single day was diminished by that. And I remember coming downstairs one morning. I was on my way to school, and my father was talking to President Carter, and he put me on the phone with him. Very pleasant exchange. And my father had me wait after they wrapped up their conversation. And he said, baby, he's a very decent man. Because my father, he was not part of that first wave of people who jumped in and embraced Carter, because Carter was a centrist. He was conservative in the party. You had Jerry Brown, who was running, who was far to the left of him at the time. I mean, you had other people running, and my parents, well, they're just very progressive people, and progressive in the context of that time was Jerry Brown, who was going with Linda Ronstadt, all that, right? And that was exciting. And plus, had a little crush on him. He was a young-ish governor, so whatever. And he said, as unpopular as he is, I found that he is a decent man. And I think he's going to go on and become one of our most beloved presidents if he loses.
Hmm.
That was in the spring of it was May of 1980. I'll never forget it. Because it was warm, and I was on my way to school, and heaven knows that has happened. And it seems that the Jimmy Carter we love now, if he ran for office, we wouldn't elect him, which is part of the craziness, or the dichotomy there. Just to help us to understand, as you understand it, our takeaway on Jimmy Carter and what it is that we need to be asking of these public officials, because running for office this is the way you do it. It's become a cash cow, and but he used that platform to lift everybody up. I said, wow, what if just one other president did that?
I totally agree with every thing you just said. Totally agree. And I think history will record. Now, he had his share of mistakes.
Yeah.
As president. It's impossible and even maybe didn't always tell the truth. He famously said he lusted in his heart. That was such a joke. He lusted in his heart. But the news won't tell you, but I think Zbigniew Brzezinski's global chessboard was one of the key moments that started. It was part of Charlie Wilson's war, where we armed the Mujahideen. There were some things like that. I think he was unfairly attacked for the Iran hostages, and there was a setup with. Well, there was a what do they call it? There's been documents that have come out that Reagan actually dawdled on it, and they could have been released sooner. So that was very unfair criticism of all of
but
the.
No one has gotten Reagan
No one
on
says
that.
that. No, that part.
They held that up until the day of the inauguration. I mean, until the inauguration.
Yes.
Inaugurated, they announced.
Right. So Reagan could be, that's right. Those kind of games, as you well know, go on in politics. And you would just hope historians, there have been, archives that have come out that have disproved that. The American public doesn't know it. That was all unfair criticism for Iran. Keeping the Shah in power and putting the Shah in power. I think, wasn't he put in power in the 50s under Eisenhower? Yeah. I mean, that's when if you want to criticize, that's where the criticism comes from. What we did in supporting the Shah and the Savak and all of these torture regimes.
Undercutting the democratically elected president, Mossadegh, right? And then installing the Shah. How do we do this all over the world?
Yeah.
Colleen Rowley, we do it everywhere, but do Americans, I think we're beginning to get it, but my goodness.
Yeah. Let's just hope we continue. And I will say the best thing about and you hope that that kind of genuineness on the part of Jimmy Carter. It's the fact that he was authentic. And that what your father said is, he is going to come out, his legacy, his post-presidency immediately showed him to be authentic. Mm-hmm. And he's not this little fake politics. People are sick of this. I want to say that's probably one of the reasons that hurt Kamala Harris. People are sick of the fake looking politician that they groom. They physically groom and they mentally groom these people to be fakes. And Jimmy Carter was not a fake. You got what you saw. And he made his share of mistakes, but at the very least, let's hope that we get more. We got to get the money out of this government right now, because this is greasing the wheels, and the military industrial complex, Eisenhower's warning, all of this there's so much that it's complicated. But if people understand that they themselves are going to be victims, we're all going to be in New Orleans. We're all going to be in schools and churches. This kind of blowback, and that's just one level of the blowback. There's a lot of other sides to this blowback, and it's all coming from this unbridled militarism and imperialism of these power mongers. Some of these power mongers that gain power in Washington, and then they want to control the world. It's not good enough to control the United States. They got to control the world. And it's the Soros of empire. It's what Chalmers Johnson said.
But not George Soros, just kidding.
No, not George. No.
Well, but one more question and then I'm gonna let you go. Do you think, because when you were last here, we talked about Kash Patel, and there's a lot of pushback on him. I think we've mentioned Robert Kennedy. I think, because I have to tell you, I have to be frank with you. I like Robert Kennedy a lot. And no, I'm not asking anyone to be perfect, but I want you to be present. And I know that before he went after Big Pharma, he was one of the most honored environmental lawyers in the world. He went after all of the garbage in our environment that literally has been killing us. He at least asked the questions, and he's been vilified for it. Kash Patel, you told me things about him that I did not know. And it seems to me that he wants to go, some of these people want to go after the corruption. I mean, no matter whatever misgivings we might have about President-elect Trump, do you think that we need to look at some of his picks and say, well, maybe we need to see where they're going to go?
Yeah.
Or examine them more closely?
And this is why it's legitimate to cross your fingers. And again, I know that I have seen this in people. I have seen people change. I have seen people with some good track records, and they get corrupted. Yes, I think the money is there, and it's going to hurt across the board. But there is reason for hope. That like I said with Kash Patel, there's a couple of things he's right about. That J. Edgar Hoover building, if you would have gone back a little while, so all the liberal side would have been for Kash Patel, claiming he wants to take the FBI out of the J. Edgar Hoover building. If somebody else had said this, under Obama, everybody would have cheered. And then because it was Trump, again, that's the partisanship. And, so anyways, let's hope that some good things. I think there's reason that you can hope for this. I don't think it's all black or white. And I think that, even Tulsi Gabbard, she seemed very good.
I like her too. I like her too.
She was really against nuclear war. Some of the commentators have talked with her who know how a nuclear war would play out and destroy the world, and they have talked with her. And they said, yeah, she understands that. Okay, guess what? There are many others. They don't understand. They think you can win nuclear war. So I think that maybe she's got some bad things about her too, Tulsi Gabbard. She went with Israel. She kind of like went along with Israel's genocide, which I'm against. But there are some good things too. So we have to hope. We have to cross our fingers that some good can come from some corners of. And I think Trump is being a little better. I mean, his first administration with Bolton and Pompeo, maybe he's doing a little better job. Maybe not. I don't think Rubio is too much better than Pompeo or whatever. So some of them are not as good. They could even be worse. Some of them might be better. I think you just have to, again, this is very, I don't think it's wise to go all the way one way or the other. And I think until we know I don't think Trump's going to keep his promises. I don't think I'll be greatly surprised.
You're FBI.
Let's have another discussion if we see Trump keeping a promise.
Well, I'm going to see, but look, you're FBI. People get the files pulled on them. And you might want to do one thing. And your file gets presented to you. Yeah, everybody, it's not just something that you see on TV or in a movie. And you get moved in another direction. And that's it. And also, to be fair, you get in the room and you presented a different set of facts, and you might have a rethink. I don't know. I'm just, as I get older and as I see more things, I'm like, well, let me kind of give you the benefit of the doubt. But what I have to do with the information that I have is follow you and listen to you, Colleen Rowley, and push. And I think that Americans are just going to have to continue to push. Your final word to us before we go.
Voting was not enough. Your vote in November, no matter how you voted, was not enough. People have got to get on the street. They have to be contacting their elected leaders. They have to be writing to our newspapers, all kinds of things. You know what? Don't complain about bad things happening if you're unwilling to take a little more responsibility, your little more citizen responsibility, not just voting. They want you to think that your vote mattered. You know what? Not so much. Your vote did not matter so much. What matters is what we do now, from now on. So that's my parting words.
Well, that's it. What did they say? Voting is the end of the beginning, not the beginning of the end. You got to get out here and make this system. It works when you work it. One of my favorite pastors, Reverend Dr. Johnny Coleman, used to say, it works when you work it. If you want a constitutional monarchy, which is where we come from, then sit back and let Meghan and Harry. Yeah, because they're over here being the Duke and the Duchess. I'm not mad at them, but we don't do that here. You want a king and a queen? All right. Then you sit back and let them do that. They will own your land. You can own your house, but you can't own your land. And increasingly, more and more Americans can't own our land. We can own our house. We were the only industrialized country that allowed you to own your land and your house. That's why the American dream is so important, because you can own. If you strike oil in your basement, it's yours. Increasingly, that is not so. We need to take this American project seriously. That is why Colleen Rowley is my heroine, because I see you and I see Shirley Chisholm. I see Fannie Lou Hamer. I see some women who stepped out here and just said, this is not right, and I'm willing to take the consequences. And I thank you for that. And you just keep on pushing. And I can't wait to get you back, because we'll have to see what happens with Speaker Johnson this week. She said, but you know what? At least Americans are stirring. Mm-hmm. And that gives me a lot of hope. But you give me a lot of hope. When I saw you standing up and asking and telling us about 9/11, I said, you know what? I think we're going to be all right. And as long as you stay in the fight, I can too, Colleen Rowley.
Well, thank you, and Happy New Year.
May God bless you and your family. Happy New Year to you. Thank you for honoring us with all of this information. I mean, according to everybody over here and some of my private messages, you are the truth teller, and they love it. I love it. I love it. God bless you. God bless you, everybody. Happy New Year. Happy New Year. May God bless you and my AM 950 radio family. Thank you so much for letting me be a part of you. It means so much that you have allowed me to come into your homes, into your cars, into your ears, maybe some of you into your hearts, and some of you, well, you've objected to some things that I've said, but I really appreciate your continuing um, to engage with me, to criticize me. All of those things I hope will make me better. All of those things I hope will help us to grow together. And I want you to know that I love you all so much. May God continue to bless you richly. And I will see you next week on the Santita Jackson Show. And hey, don't forget to check us out on Keep Hope Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson. Go to the iHeartRadio app and key in Keep Hope Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson. We'll be talking about this and so much. Who knows what's going to happen by Sunday? I don't know. We're on from 7 to 9 Chicago time. What? Minneapolis time, Central Standard Time. I'm sending you so much love, everybody. God bless you. Happy New Year, everybody. Santita Jackson, AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. We're out.